Hey everyone, welcome to the Monday News Jump on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I hope you are doing well. I hope you had a good weekend. We're going to get you caught up with the latest training camp news as the week begins. The Bengals did take the field on Monday, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some news and notes around the NFL. But we'll get to all of that. I'll kind of share my screen. I do, for those of you who joined last week, I didn't have my laptop, so I was unable to share my screen last week. I apologize. I've got it back now. We're all good to go, and computer's out of the shop. We're good to go. So I should be able to share some screenshots with you, get you caught up on all things. I'm Anthony Cosenza with CincyJungle.com and the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. Good to have you with us, whether you're joining us live, joining us after the fact on one of the channels, the platforms that you get our show, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, Megaphone, iHeartRadio, or if you prefer the video platforms, if you get it on YouTube or Cincy Jungle's Facebook page. We thank you for joining us. And in case you are new around these parts, we do the Monday News Jump to get you going through all kinds of different Bengals news, NFL news, all that good stuff. We have the Wednesday night show with myself and John Sheeran, another contributor at Cincy Jungle. We do more of a deep dive analysis of what's going on. And then we do listener questions on Friday. So that's kind of our setup. In season, when regular season games happen, we will be doing also a pregame show with Matt Minnick, John Sheeran, and myself. We're going to kind of tag team that, guests, giveaways, all that good stuff. So join us for that. And then, of course, we'll do the post-game show to give you analysis of what just happened with the Cincinnati Bengals and their respective games. Before we get to news and notes, I'm teasing you, but a couple of announcements that are pretty big announcements for this show and stuff that you will be able to get in terms of content on those aforementioned channels that I talked about. We will be having, we're probably this week, we're still ironing out the final details. I've teased it a couple times. We will be having an interview with new Bengals defensive lineman Mike Daniels. We're working with his representation to iron out a good time that works for him. It's a little bit of a crazy schedule for these guys right now, so we're trying to work out a good time. But they are definitely interested in having him on our show, and so we're excited to have him. We will let you know when that occurs. We'll also be interviewing Sam Hubbard, Bengals defensive line. We're getting all the defensive line guys. Sam Hubbard will be joining our program, and that interview will be available for everybody, I believe, next week. So check that out if you are able to do that. So let's get to it. If you are ready to get to some news and notes here, I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. So let's start with, and this is on CincyJungle.com. This is just the kind of the news link setup here. And then we're going to go a little bit more specific in terms of what happened in training camp, particularly as it pertains to Sunday and Monday for those practices. Let's start with the Bengals. John Ross is back. John Ross is back with the Cincinnati Bengals, returned, I believe, to Cincinnati on Thursday and began practicing this weekend, was seen practicing Sunday, was seen practicing Monday. And you can see here an article that is courtesy of Bengals.com. John Ross is eager to prove himself. If you followed earlier on Monday, there is a training camp review podcast or video cast by Dan Horde and Dave Lapham. They were talking about Ross's world-class speed and him being back. Joe Burrow in practice on Monday did throw completed a deep ball to Ross in practice, did a little bit underthrow it. And I think they were just talking about the fact that, since Ross hasn't really been there, they're trying to get their timing down. And, just that speed that Ross has, you have to acclimate yourself in terms of how you're going to throw the ball, trajectory, all that good stuff. So Burrow's still kind of working through that. There was a little bit of an underthrown ball, albeit one that was completed in practice on Monday. So John Ross is back with the Cincinnati Bengals and back at practice. Speaking of which, a somewhat predictable move, the Bengals placed defensive lineman Renell Wren on injured reserve in an effort to activate Ross. So Renell Wren had that quadriceps injury. carted off the field, and unfortunately never recovered there. So they put him on the injured reserve list, and they activated Ross in his place. Let's talk about some other bad injury news. Unfortunately, I'm going to share my screen again. This article is on cincyjungle.com as well. Unfortunately, the Bengals defense has been hit yet again with the injury bug. Jordan Evans was carted off the field with an injury on Monday. Evans has a little bit of an uphill climb this year in terms of making the roster. Last couple of years, he was kind of one of the later guys on the depth chart that was kind of expected to make the team. Now with Logan Wilson, Akeem Davis-Gaither, Marcus Bailey, Josh Bynes, Austin Calitro, all joined in that linebacker group. Evans may have been an odd man out, but unfortunately, Tyler Dragon did say that the injury does not appear to be serious, but we've seen and heard that song and dance before. Here's the thing with this too that I've learned about Bengals training camp and their utilization of the carts with these injuries. Number one, obviously the heat and humidity. They want to kind of if someone's dinged up, they want to kind of, save the energy level of these guys. And the other thing I've come to realize, at least from what I've been told, is that where they take them from the field, where they practice on the field, and where they take them in terms of, medical services and everything, it's a little ways away. So they use the cart a little more liberally than maybe some other teams do, just based on the layout of the field where they practice, all of that. So, sometimes when you hear cart, you're automatically, oh my gosh. But it sounds like this may not be overly serious, but it could be more of the, maybe more in line of something similar to Sean Williams, where it's a couple weeks or something like that. Obviously, we will relay that when we know more. But Sean Williams, you can see in this article here, he was carted off recently, and he's coming back in just a couple of weeks. But then on the other hand, Renell Wren was carted off, and he's done for the year. So these things are a mixed bag, but not a good sign, at least at first blush, with Jordan Evans being carted off the field on Monday. Let's talk a little bit more about some sights and sounds at training camp before we get to more Bengals news and NFL news. Again, I'm Anthony Cosenza with Cincy Jungle. Thanks for joining us, especially for joining us live on the Facebook or YouTube channels. Appreciate that. Let's get to some more news here. The big topic of conversation, especially in recent days, seems to be about the wide receivers. So I mentioned that John Ross is back, and he was running with the ones as the number 3 guy. You're basically, you had Tyler Boyd, you had Auden Tate running in AJ Green's place. AJ Green's still not at practice. I'll talk about that in just a second. Auden Tate kind of running in AJ Green's place. You got Tyler Boyd out there, and then John Ross. Those were kind of your top 3 at practice on Monday. T. Higgins is now back as well. He was battling kind of that hamstring injury, so he is practicing as well. And apparently all is well in terms of how the receiver group is looking. If you Ben Baby of ESPN, who covers the Cincinnati Bengals, said that Auden Tate might be early candidate for Offensive Rookie of the Year in terms of the performances he's put on in training camp. So kind of training camp Offensive Rookie of the Year, or not Rookie of the Year, rather Offensive MVP, rather, in terms of, some of the things he's been doing. I guess Brian Callahan has been gushing about Auden Tate's catch radius, something we know quite a bit about. Again, we'll talk about AJ Green in just a second. He is doing some sideline work. So we'll talk about that. But Higgins is looking pretty good. You've got some of the other guys. Tyler Boyd is Tyler Boyd. And we've heard Alex Erickson make some plays in practices, touchdown catches. And of course, Mike Thomas, not that Mike Thomas, but Mike Thomas, the Bengals picked up in off-season free agency. He has looked very good in practices as well. So a lot of talent in this group. It's a matter of health, and we do know that Joe Burrow likes to spread the ball around. If you watched him at LSU, that is a forte of his, and he is doing that in practice. I'm going to bring this up. This is from Laura Fowler of The Athletic here. So give me 1 second. This is a video shot of AJ Green doing some running and stuff on the side field. So if this is her Twitter account here. He is working. He's doing some catching. He's doing some different things. He's just not going full go and helmet and pads and all that kind of stuff. Again, real quick video, 3-second video, but he is getting some form of work in. So I know with what happened last year with AJ Green and how we were told, oh, it's not going to be a big deal, not going to be a big deal. Obviously, it became a big deal. You see this here, and this is good news. We knew this was a far more minor issue than what plagued him last year. But obviously, I think there's always a little bit of hesitancy to believe that. And so you look at it, you look at this video here, and AJ Green looks like he's getting some work in. And, that's good news. That's good news. He's not just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. He is keeping loose and working through that, what is perceived to be a hamstring injury. So I wanted to share that with you all. Thanks to Laura Fowler for sharing that on her Twitter account. So, continuing on with some of the sights and sounds of training camp, especially as it pertains to Monday, CJ Uzomah gushed about Joe Burrow. There was an instance in practice in terms of some different formations and trying out different play calls at the line, and Joe Burrow apparently is making numerous calls, making differing calls, and CJ Uzomah was taken aback in a good way in terms of Joe Burrow's maturity level, his ability to process different formations and all kinds of different things. And then, of course, there was the performance earlier on Monday, the Bengals first team offense against the first team defense. Now, granted, there are some guys based on some of the injuries I talked about. But the first team offense against the first team defense, Joe Burrow started at their own 20-yard line, marched all the way down the field, and capped the drive with an Auden Tate touchdown on Monday. That was one of the highlights in practice in terms of a drive that the Bengals offense had against their first team defense. So take that with what you will. Again, no preseason games, so we can't really gauge in-game stuff, but a lot of these guys are doing scrimmage style things. They are in pads right now. That started, and this is kind of the dog days of training camp. We're just not going to be able to see what they look like even in limited snaps in preseason. So, right this time of year, everybody looks good. Everybody's doing things right. A lot of coach speak, a lot of player speak. So you got to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But with this team in such a big state of transition, with so many new players, so many important new players in important positions, with that being the case in Cincinnati, you have to kind of take it a little more seriously than I guess you would any other year, especially when it comes to a rookie quarterback looking good on both instances. I saw our good friend Jake Liskow and others talking about Bobby Hart, who has been having a pretty strong camp so far. Got beat pretty badly a couple of times by a former undrafted rookie free agent, kind of edge rusher linebacker on Monday. That's not a good sign, not only for Bobby Hart's career, but not a good sign for Joe Burrow and the offensive line's performance. But good news also, Jonah Williams has returned as advertised. According to coaches, he is looking very strong, putting up a good performance in training camp, which is good to hear. Trey Hopkins has been a little up and down, got beat pretty badly by DJ Reader in one video that we've seen, but other times he's been pretty strong at the point of attack. And Michael Jordan has also kind of been hit and miss, but to be expected, still a very young player and a guy that they really like. So there's this offensive line is going to take some lumps. What we need to see them do in terms of the Bengals and what they are game planning, we need to see them, if there are early struggles in the season, they need to not wait until weeks 13, 14, 15 like they have in 2018 and 2019 to make the correct adjustments, maybe move guys in and out of the lineup if needed, add an extra lineman, whatever they need to do. They need to get that done earlier in the year if they are experiencing issues as opposed to what they've done the past 2 years, where they've kind of sat on their hands and finally made some adjustments, relied more on the run, and then you saw a more successful offensive line. So hopefully they are concocting a better scheme right away this year. I see Tyler Thies in the live Facebook chat saying, let Fred Johnson start at right tackle. I think they're going to give him some form of an opportunity to grab that spot, especially if Hart falters. Again, no preseason games, so a guy like Fred Johnson is not getting an opportunity to showcase himself and potentially start a game to show, as a starter, what he can do at the right tackle spot. It's just basically all relying on practices, training camp practices, scrimmages. It is what it is, unfortunately, this year. I'm going to be here for a couple more minutes. Again, I'm Anthony Cosenza with CincyJungle.com. This is the Orange and Black Insider and our Monday news jump, getting you started with Bengals news, NFL news, getting your week started right. And then you can join us midweek for the Wednesday night analysis show, Friday for listener questions. And then we'll also be sprinkling in, as I mentioned, some player interviews. I teased that at the beginning. So you'll want to get those when they are available, when we get those set up, which should be in the very near future. We'll keep you apprised of that. Some other things I wanted to share in terms of news. The Cincinnati Bengals, some former Cincinnati Bengals are in the news in the form of guys who were starters in their secondary last year. B.W. Webb and Dre Kirkpatrick both were picked up. At least I'm pretty sure B.W. Webb was. I'll have to double check on that. But those guys are both now with the Arizona Cardinals. Dre Kirkpatrick had a visit there, and one of their former defensive coaches is now a coach in Arizona. So the connection is there, and they are providing depth for the Arizona Cardinals in terms of the secondary. So good for them. Dre Kirkpatrick had some ups and downs with the Cincinnati Bengals, was set to make a lot of money this year. The Bengals freed that money up to help them get guys like DJ Reader, Josh Bynes, and multiple other players. So, the Kirkpatrick signing is because there was an injury in the secondary. So it's possible that he starts in terms of Kirkpatrick for the Cardinals, but we'll see. At least gives them some veteran depth. The Bengals did have a couple of tryouts with some players because of some injuries, but I think any additions now would be something that really would be a little bit of a moot point because Sean Williams is set to return, and I don't know that there's going to be much of an opportunity for some of those guys to hang on unless it's kind of a bigger name that ends up being cut. That is maybe an unexpected cut, but they hosted 4 players, and we'll definitely get you more info on that if they end up signing any of those guys. Around the league, let's talk AFC North, and then we'll kind of go, we talked a little bit kind of Bengals / Cardinals, but we'll talk big picture around the NFL here. Earl Thomas, probably a guy who may be a Hall of Fame safety in this league. He big get for the Ravens last year. He has had a heck of an offseason, and not in a good way. Earl Thomas, if you remember early in May, he was in some form of a domestic dispute where there was some tryst situation where he was with another woman and his wife caught him, or I don't know, with his brother. It was a weird situation. Go read that. Very odd deal. That was a situation. And then now, just about 3 months later, he was in some form of a physical altercation with Chuck Clark, a teammate of him on Baltimore, and the Ravens have since released Earl Thomas, a guy who is still very effective, particularly in pass coverage. He is gone from Baltimore, so kind of a significant blow to a team that is very, very stacked all over the place. And a guy that, is still kind of at the prime / back end of his career. He's had some injuries and stuff recently, but still a very effective player. And I think the Ravens tried to shop him for a trade, but did not work out. So Earl Thomas is no longer with the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson missed a couple of recent practices with a couple of injuries. I'm sure it's fine, that sort of thing. But that's something to note. Lamar Jackson is dealing with some form of an injury issue. It's being called a soft tissue injury. Probably nothing serious, but he's being held out of practice. And then if you're interested in the San Francisco 49ers, they are having some problems at wide receiver themselves. Jalen Hurd, not Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurd is on injured reserve with another ACL injury, and now their rookie Brandon Ayuk out of Arizona State, a talented kid, has a hamstring injury, which seems to be going around this time of year, the old hammy issue. So the 49ers are down a little bit in terms of wide receiver depth. They may look to make a move there, but not too great in terms of their depth there. Antoine Winfield Jr. is impressing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at safety. Very versatile guy. He's small for what you would consider maybe an in-the-box safety type of guy, but can cover pretty well, is a willing tackler, and was a guy, I think he went early second round, so he is a guy that I guess is playing very well in terms of the Buccaneers' practices and what they are able to do. So Winfield Jr. looks like he's a pretty impressive guy. That's going to about wrap up the news and notes for us this week. We usually try and keep these at about 20 minutes, and that's about where we are at right now. So thanks for joining us. Again, I'm Anthony Cosenza with CincyJungle.com. You can join us every Monday for these and our other shows that we have, as well as the shows by Matt Minnick, who does Chalk Talk on our Orange and Black Insider channel. By the way, there is a little on this side, I believe, there's a little logo for you to click and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're watching us via YouTube. So please do that, and you can get our videos, Matt Minnick's Chalk Talk videos. Do that. And then we have Orange is the New Black, a podcast by Ace, Boogie, and Zim Hude that is also on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel. So check that out as well. Check out when we have our 2 special Bengals guests coming up in the next week or so. We'll definitely be pumping that out. And we thank you for tuning in. Thanks for joining us.